Greetings and welcome to another fashionably late review here at Words About Games. Amy here, and today I want to talk to you about Warm Snow. First of all, I want to give out the general information on Warm Snow. It was developed by Bad Mud Studio, published by Billy, and released on PC via Steam on January 19th, 2022. And the store page reads, Warm Snow is a roguelike action game with a background set in a dark fantasy world where the eerie warm snow holds sway. You will play as the warrior Bayan on a crusade against the five great clans in order to save a world teetering on the brink of destruction. So as far as my general thoughts on Warm Snow goes, I've reached the credits once in this game, and I'm pretty sure there's multiple endings or like different paths. And I know there's higher difficulties because I've looked at the achievements, but like this game legitimately caught me by surprise. Like it wasn't on my radar at all, like on my release radar at all. Like I saw a couple of people talking about it on Twitter, went in, had a look at the trailer, and was like, yeah, this looks like it could be an Amy game. So you know, I downloaded it, played it for a few hours on stream, put it down, and then in 2 days I smashed about 12 to 15 hours of it. It's hard to tell because my Steam went offline for quite a long time while I was playing it, and it hasn't counted the hours I was playing it offline. It's a really fun action roguelike. It's really fast paced, very furious combat. The monster designs are cool as heck. And I like the classes and the synergies with the different skills and abilities. But it did take a bit of time to open up. Like after that stream, the initial sort of like 3 to 4 hour stream I played of it, I was having a pretty good time, but like it hadn't really gripped me yet. And I put it down for like a few days, maybe a week, before picking it back up. And it was only really when I picked it back up and unlocked some extra classes, that I couldn't stop playing it. So it's just a thought, maybe like if you've tried Warm Snow and you've played it for a few hours and you haven't really been feeling that sort of like it grip you properly, yeah, maybe just like keep it going, because like it starts out good, but it gets really good as you start unlocking more stuff and start being able to put more synergies together, especially like, you know, with the all of the different skills and abilities and weapons and classes that you can unlock. So I want to start my more in-depth thoughts by talking about the gameplay, because this is an action roguelite, and as I've said before, like for the most part, action roguelikes tend to live or die by their gameplay more than anything else. And Warm Snow has a really fun, really satisfying combat system, like underlying all of the different systems and mechanics and all of the things that you can unlock and use to modify combat. Like the underlying combat itself, it's just really fun. It's really fast paced. You use melee combat for the most part, but you are given flying swords that you can sort of telepathically shoot at enemies, which is always really satisfying, like to just suddenly send swords flying in all directions. And what makes the combat so fun is the way in which you have to sort of think on the fly, right? Like the combat is so fast paced that you have like split seconds to make decisions, and the game throws a lot of different enemies at you in a lot of different combinations, and you have to kind of figure out how to work around that, right? Like you'll be being attacked by like some weak-ish melee fighters, but also there'll be like a giant pig enemy that tanks a bit more damage, and you have to kind of figure out how to dodge that while also trying to kill the guys that are trying to kill you, and then keeping an eye out for like a charging pig coming at you, and then maybe there'll be somebody doing some ranged attacks over there, and you have to figure out sort of quite quickly how you're going to navigate around that. And that decision making is affected by the abilities you have, by the classes that you're using, by the different sort of advantages that you've set yourself up with on this particular run. The biggest way you do this is by collecting relics. So throughout each run, you'll be collecting different relics that slot into different slots, I guess. No, that was a terrible sentence, but we're gonna roll with it. And depending on which slot you select a relic to go into, it will alter what that relic actually does. So for example, if you put it into a specific in one relic into a specific slot, it might change the way your flicker works, which is the dodge that you can see me doing on the gameplay footage. So it might if you flicker, it might leave death petals behind that will explode and do damage to enemies. But if you put it in a different slot, it might give you an active ability that once your rage meter fills up, you can drop death petals that will explode and do damage to enemies. Or it will go into a different slot again entirely, and it'll just every certain amount of time it will just drop death petals and they'll explode and do damage to enemies. So like even where you put all of these different relics can fundamentally alter your playstyle, because while you're building this class run by run by run, you have to be mindful of the relics that you have and what they do, because that's how you're going to successfully navigate your way through the game, by understanding the things that will happen when you swing a sword, when your rage meter fills up, when you flicker, when you take damage, when you dodge successfully. And with all of these different relics being active in all of these different slots, that's how you have to make the decisions as you're fighting through the game. And it's really fun, and you can get some really cool synergies going. Like, you can be halfway through a run which you think is just junk, and you're just doing it to collect some skill points that you can use to unlock some permanent buffs or upgrades. But then all of a sudden you'll find something that can wildly transform the way you play the game and the way you play your character, and all of a sudden, like, you feel like a god as you're smashing your way through this game. And that's just one of the really cool things about roguelites in general. Like, that's one of the things that makes them feel great, is just suddenly being able to put these two things together, or put these like different relics together, and then all of a sudden you're just mashing through enemies that otherwise might have been a bit tough. Like, one of my favorite things is you can get abilities like throughout the game as you like defeat bosses, and that can offer you some ridiculous buffs that fundamentally alter how everything works in combat, as well as weapons that don't really change your attack pattern too much, but they do give you buffs, so you have to be mindful of which ones you're picking up. But like, you can just do what I did to get through the early part of the game, which was just to stack everything into attack speed. And when I did that, there was a boss that was giving me a lot of trouble, but my attack speed was so fast that I was just holding the melee attack button down, and bosses' health bars were just melting before my very eyes, and it was so satisfying. And that's one of the big pluses in Warm Snow, is that you can put all of these things together in such a way that it just feels super satisfying, because you've picked these things, you've put them together that way, and all of a sudden you're just destroying this game, and it's so much fun. The synergies that you can put together, the way you can change how you even approach combat on a very fundamental level, it's just really great and really satisfying, and I cannot recommend it highly enough if you like that kind of gameplay and you like that kind of thing. The boss battles themselves are definitely the highlight of the game. Each one is just a lot of fun to play through again and again, because that's sort of one of the things you have to balance when playing a roguelite. It's not that you're going to beat this boss and then move on to the next area of the game. It's that you're going to beat this boss and then you're going to be back again and again and again, because you're going to be running through the same parts of the game over and over again. So the boss fights have to be really fun to do multiple times over and over again, and they really are. Like, learning the different like boss mechanics is really satisfying. The boss fights are really fun. The highlight has to go to, there's a lady at the top of a tower called the Fate Tower, and her boss fight is wild. It's really wild, and it's so much fun to learn and play through. And I'm not going to spoil any more of it, and I don't have any footage of it because I didn't stream that part of the game, but it's so cool. The only thing I will say about all of the systems and mechanics of the game, in sort of a negative, as sort of a criticism, is I wish the game explained itself a little bit better, because it can be hard to grasp at first. And I think that was part of the reason why it took me a few hours to really get into the game. Like, you can bring up a help screen that can explain to you sort of what bleed does, or what like the different elemental attacks do, but like that kind of stuff is sort of self-explanatory if you've played this kind of game before, but it doesn't do a great job of explaining other things. Like, for example, what rage is. It took me hours to figure out that rage was a meter that built up, that powered your active abilities, or sometimes powered passive abilities, where it's like it would fill up and then something would happen and then it would start again, and you filled it up by fighting enemies and killing enemies. And I wish there were parts of this game that explain themselves way better than they actually do. That would be my sort of one critique of the gameplay and the combat. Also, though, like, while I'm still talking about the gameplay, like, if you're having trouble with the game, just keep going through it. Like, you'll eventually find the way through and be able to find your way past the challenges that are in this game. Like, it's not necessarily a massively difficult game, but it's also not necessarily the easiest game I've ever played. But as you unlock different classes, some of them will make your life a lot easier. For example, there's a class called Sun Piercer, which you can unlock after you beat the second boss. It might be the third boss, I'm not sure. Depends how you count in the bosses in the game. But once you unlock the Sun Piercer, you can rip your way through this game quite easily. I don't know if easily is necessarily the right word, and it may just be that that's my specific type of playstyle, but the Sun Piercer, once I unlocked it, really let me get so far into this game, and it was actually the thing that let me finish the game. And the way you'll get through the game before that is the permanent progression is really good. It's really satisfying. It's really well balanced. Skill points around exponentially as you defeat bosses. So the better you do in the game, the faster you'll unlock permanent upgrades. But everything in the skill tree only costs 1 skill point. So even if you're stuck and you're not getting too far, like, you're still always progressing at a very consistent pace. Even if you're stuck on the same boss over and over again, you'll still be having fun with the fun combat and the cool synergies, and you'll still be making progress at a really satisfying speed. Getting into talking about the story, the characters, and the voice acting is it's something I want to criticize, but I also don't want to criticize. So Warm Snow is a Chinese game that's been made by Chinese developers, and a lot of it is either translated badly or not translated into English at all. So the only thing I really know about the story is that it started snowing, the snow was bad, everybody turned into monsters, and now you're a samurai with flying swords and you have to kill the monsters. So the characters' dialogue in the game isn't really translated at all. Like, there's a lot of spoken dialogue in the game. For example, there's a shopkeeper who talks a lot whenever you approach or leave, and she turns up before every single boss fight, and I have no idea what she's talking about, and I don't really get what's going on in the game. Like, it seems like a very interesting world, and the mood and the atmosphere of the game definitely carry through despite the missing translations. But I did get invested in what was happening as from a sort of visual storytelling perspective, but in terms of the actual plot and the narrative that was going on, like, it was hard to get into because unfortunately I don't understand Chinese. And there are some super intriguing ideas at work. For example, the boss fight I mentioned earlier, there's some interesting stuff that happens in that boss fight that I would have loved to have understood more, but what I did understand of it from what was visually presented to me on the screen without the need to understand dialogue was still really interesting. I do wish I knew what the shopkeeper was talking about, though, because her voice acting is very good, and it seemed important. And also, she's super hot. One thing that doesn't need translated dialogue to come across is how cool the world is in terms of its world design. Each chapter takes place in a different biome. All of the biomes are really unique from each other. So you get lush forests, moving on to like castles, moving on to like mechanical workshops. Each area is really distinct. The art direction is fantastic. I really love the style that the developers have chosen for this game, and I want to shout out the enemy designs, especially the bosses, because there are some brilliant and grotesque and unique enemies and moments in this game that I know are going to stick with me for a while. Like, in 6 months' time, I'll still be like randomly having thoughts about some of the things that I saw in this game, especially in the boss fights. The levels themselves, the actual individual levels, do get a little bit repetitive after 20 deaths, but that is also part of the fun of the roguelike, because you get to learn things, right? Like, you can walk through levels if you've got Sun Piercer and you're just lasering everything from a distance, and I can literally walk through some levels and just kill everything before I even see it on the screen, which is kind of fun, but also they do get a little bit repetitive, and I think the game probably could have done with a little bit more randomization. Like, for example, there's a boss fight in the first chapter, the prologue chapter, with a big wolfy boy, and I'm kind of sick of fighting him at this point. So as far as my final thoughts go, Warm Snow, it's a cool roguelike with really great art and enemy designs. The progression system is really well paced, and the combat is what I would call Moorish. Once it really got its teeth into me, I had a tough time putting it down until I hit the credits. So if you're a fan of roguelites, like, I would specifically say something like Hades or Binding of Isaac, and you need something to scratch that itch, Warm Snow is definitely worth a lot. So that's going to do it for this review. If you've played Warm Snow, let me know what you think of it. Did you like the game? Are you somewhere in the middle, or was it just not for you? Leave us a comment. down below in the YouTube, you know where the comments go on a YouTube video. Or if you want to hit me up on Twitter, I'm always open to talking about games. I've been Amy Kate Alexander for Words About Games. This has been a fashionably late review of Warm Snow, and I'll see you in the next one.